Hey, Pretty Girl Club. Welcome back to another episode of the Decentering Men series. So, in this episode, I want to talk about emotional labor. I hear a lot of women saying, oh, women do more emotional labor in the relationship than men, but notice how no one ever describes what that emotional labor is. So, today I'm going to go into it so that you can be sure to make the best decision for your love life. I don't promote any particular type of relationship or non-relationship on this channel. The Decentering Men series is solely created to help you make the best decision for you. So do whatever you want with this information, but let's go ahead and get into it. So if you look online, the definition of emotional labor is the mental activity required to manage or perform the routine tasks necessary for maintaining relationships and ensuring smooth running of a household or process, typically regarded as an unappreciated or unacknowledged burden borne disproportionately by women. It also says the management of your emotions in order to present yourself and interact with other people in a certain way while doing a job. Emotional labor is when you try to calm your anxiety after you see that your boyfriend is still texting his ex. That is a form of emotional labor because you're having to go within yourself and kind of soothe yourself. You're having to rationalize his behavior. You're having to control your tone of voice when you're speaking to him. You know how some people are bad at emotional regulation, so they'll just start yelling and shouting and stuff. So emotional labor is having to go out of your way to not have these outbursts whenever you're unhappy in the relationship. Another form of emotional labor is when you are displaying an emotion that you don't actually feel. So, for example, we all know that it's very common for women who are married to fake orgasms. That is a way of having emotional labor because you're pretending like you're satisfied. You're pretending like that was just the best experience ever. And, you're going through this whole entire act so you can convince the man that he is not trash in the bedroom. So that's another form of emotional labor. It's something that a woman does to almost protect the man's ego or to not hurt his feelings. Another form of emotional labor is when you're biting your tongue. So when you hold back how you really feel, if he says, hey, I want to go 50-50 or I want to go 60-40 with you paying the majority of the bills, and you're kind of biting your tongue, you're not telling him everything about how you feel, you're not speaking out loud what you're actually thinking, so you're filtering out your words, you're being very strategic, and you are displaying a smile on your face, but in reality, you may not be very happy. You know how a lot of men say, well, you need to be grateful for what you have. Well, that is actually a form of emotional labor. So if the woman, let's say she's in a relationship with a guy and he is not like the best option for her, oftentimes women will just kind of remain silent. They will put on a smile and they will live their lives in a tolerable level of permanent unhappiness under the guise of being grateful. So this is why I'm actually not a big fan of when people try to force you and pressure you into being grateful, because be grateful, that kind of leads to the talking point of settling. It's like, oh no, you just need to be grateful for what you have. But another form of emotional labor is when you are walking on eggshells around a man. So let's say he just got home from work, he's very stressed out, he had a bad day, and you can see on his face that he's not in a good mood. And so now you are kind of walking on eggshells. Maybe you're trying extra hard to cheer him up. You're always the one that's like coming back to him whenever he's in a bad mood. You're always the one offering him a cup of water, you're offering to cheer him up somehow. All of that is emotional labor. And this is part of why women say that we do more emotional labor in a relationship than the man, because oftentimes if a woman is sad or she's in a bad mood, the guy is not going to go out of his way to try to like think of how he can cheer her up. On average, a guy will just be quiet or he will just let her wallow in sadness. Some guys will go as far as even ignoring you if they can see that you're visibly upset because they just don't want to be around you at all. So this is what a lot of women mean when they say that they put in more emotional labor into the relationship. Another form of emotional labor is when you have to explain your emotions to the man. So you guys know this is a part of what made me lose interest in marriage with the average guy, because I feel like, for example, let's say I'm with this guy and I'm so in love with him and I think he's so incredible. And then I see that he's got porn on his phone, he's got OnlyFans on his phone, he's following all these Instagram models, maybe he's texting his ex or something like that. Emotional labor is me having to explain to him for 30 minutes why I feel uncomfortable with that, why that doesn't make me feel loved, why it doesn't make me feel special to have the one man that I want to impress the most, the one man that I love the most, to have him pass me up so that he can simp over other women online or fantasize about exes. That is a huge emotional labor, to have to continuously explain to a man why you feel a certain way, or having to continuously teach him why it gives you anxiety when he is talking on the phone late at night with his ex, to have to explain to him why you don't like it when he compares you to another woman, to have to explain to him why you don't like when he says that your outfit's ugly or that hairstyle is ugly. Like having to explain how you feel to a man and having to explain every single one of your emotional vulnerabilities, that is a huge form of emotional labor. By the way, make sure you're careful with that though, because a lot of men, if you're the type of woman who doesn't want to explain yourself, men will actually take advantage of that. And then they'll be like, oh, well, you said you didn't care. You said you didn't care if I looked at porn. So you didn't give me any rules as to what porn I could and couldn't look at. And so that's why I'm jacking off to your friend on Instagram. So by the way, for the women who do allow their guys to look at porn, have you ever asked him what kind of porn he looks at, or have you ever caught him with that? Because that's a trap that a lot of women fall into. They're trying to be the cool girl. They're trying to pretend like they don't care, but then one day they'll walk in on him and then they'll see him pleasuring himself to her friend or to her sister or to, one of his Instagram friends or his ex from college or something like that. So all of that is emotional labor. Having to manage your constant anxiety about what he's doing when you're not around. Having to manage your own insecurities when you're at the beach and you see him staring at every other girl and now he's not paying attention to you and you were just trying to have a good time. That is a form of emotional labor. Another form of emotional labor is dealing with the baggage that man has in his past. So this could be baby mama drama. You have to pick up the kids every Saturday, or, you have to deal with his ex-wife or something, or you have to see your crazy in-laws at the cookout, dealing with his annoying siblings, or maybe he has children of his own, and now you have to deal with some disrespectful children, or you have to get to know his children, and you have to try to kind of manage their emotions and make sure that you have a healthy relationship with them. That is another form of emotional labor. And this is why I do not promote dating baby daddies on this channel. I mean, I guess I could see if you have kids of your own or something, but generally speaking, that's going to be a lot of emotional labor, especially dealing with somebody else's children, because you don't know what kind of traumas they've been through. You don't know what their relationship is like with their father or with their mother. And so now you are taking on not just the emotional baggage of that man, but you're also taking on the baggage from those children. But that leads me to the next form of emotional labor, and that is dealing with his emotional baggage. We all know that men are not socialized to process their emotions properly. And so there are plenty of men who are walking around with mental illnesses and they don't even realize it. There are plenty of men who are walking around depressed or with inferiority complexes. They've got all these things wrong with them: anxiety, sex addiction, porn addiction, video game addictions. And you have no idea about those things until you move in with him or until you marry him. So that's another huge form of emotional labor for the woman, because now the woman is having to deal with that. She's like, okay, he didn't get to play video games today, so I already know he's going to be annoyed. He's not going to want to talk to me when he gets home from work because he wants to go straight to playing video games, or he's addicted to his phone. He wants to go straight to his phone screen. He's not going to be emotionally available for the next 2 hours because he just got off work and now this is the only way he can relax. All of that is emotional labor. Having to strategize about how you are going to behave around him and kind of like walking on eggshells in hopes that he has his coping mechanisms or whatever, that is a form of emotional labor. Another form of emotional labor is dealing with arguments. So there are articles online that say that quote unquote healthy couples argue up to 2 times per week. 2 times per week is 104 arguments per year. Some of us do not have the tolerance level to go through over 100 arguments over the course of a year just to say that you have a boyfriend or just to say you have a man, because that's a form of emotional labor. You have to go back and forth. You have to listen to his side. Sometimes when people argue, they don't know how to speak to you without gaslighting you. That's actually the case for a lot of men, because a lot of guys lack conflict resolution skills because they're not socialized in the same way women are. They're not taught to nurture. They're not taught to be sisterly. You know how they teach women like, oh, you want to have a sisterhood. You need to be nice, or like you catch more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. A lot of little boys are not socialized like this. So boys grow up to be men, and then they end up having no conflict resolution skills whatsoever. And so then it becomes the woman's job to constantly resolve the conflict. So you could start off just having an argument about something very simple, something very small, like, which basketball team is the best, or like, I don't know, what's your favorite vacation spot? So it starts out as a very small argument, but because he doesn't have conflict resolution skills, now you have to figure out a way to kind of butter him up, to kind of soften him up again, to get him to open up with you. You have to try to figure out strategically what to say so that he can finally be vulnerable. All of that is another form of emotional labor, because you are trying to strategize on how to get him to convey his emotions. Another form of emotional labor is protecting his fragile ego. I see this happen a lot in marriages where they've been married for 30 or 40 years. The woman in the marriage, she will let the guy have it. She'll let him win the argument. She will let him do or say whatever he wants. She will let him look at the other women. She will let him, look at the sex workers or go to the strip club or whatever. She'll basically put up with and tolerate everything because she wants to keep that man. But she doesn't know that that is a huge form of emotional labor. So she's going to spend the rest of her life trying to calm all of those anxious thoughts. She has to spend the rest of her life not speaking up and basically remaining silent. And if things are left unspoken, that causes emotional weight. It's normal to be able to vent. Every person should have an emotional safe space where they can talk and where they can feel like they're seen and feel like they are heard. But we all know that a lot of men are not socialized to be good listeners, especially to women. And so this is a huge emotional drain on the woman, because she will spend all of her time trying to talk to him over and over and over again because he didn't listen the first time. And this is why a lot of guys will call women nags. It's because the guy is not listening to the woman from the beginning. And that is a huge burden on that woman emotionally, because she's investing all this time in him. She's giving him her body. She's giving him her money. And then in return, she doesn't even have the same emotional safe space that he has. And so she is doing all of the listening and he's doing all of the talking. She's the one doing the submitting. He's the one who gets to be the leader. And so that is all another form of emotional labor. Another common one is being that man's cheerleader, being his encourager, and then you do not receive the same energy. So he does not reciprocate. So you're telling him how handsome he is, how smart he is, how talented he is. And then when it's your turn, like when you've done something great, he downplays it. He says it's not a big deal. He says that your business is only succeeding because it's trendy or because, that's just a hot topic right now on social media. So he's downplaying your successes while you are constantly hyping him up and you are basically pumping him up emotionally. So you're acting as his emotional cheerleader. You're acting as his emotional support, but then you are not receiving that same thing in return. And this is a huge form of emotional labor because this causes you to feel lonely. Loneliness is an emotion. There are a lot of women in relationships right now who are very emotionally isolated. So they don't feel safe sharing how they feel with their husband or their boyfriend, but he gets to share whatever he wants with her, and she is expected to sit there and listen. That is a huge form of emotional labor because that woman still feels like she has nowhere to turn. And this is why whenever people talk about the decentering men movement and they're like, oh, it's going to be lonely, like it's super lonely. And it's like, the loneliest feelings I've ever felt have been when I've been in a relationship and I still don't feel like anyone has my back. Or, I depended on him for something and he didn't show up. He didn't come through. Those were the biggest feelings of loneliness I've ever had. But that's another form of emotional labor. It's feeling that loneliness, yet staying in the relationship so you can provide him with the companionship. You're giving him the orgasms, you're giving him the companionship. Meanwhile, you're not satisfied sexually. You're not satisfied with his companionship. That's another thing. A woman's companionship is often much more valuable than a man's. And even men know this. This is why if a man comes upon hard times, he doesn't go call other men. No, he calls the nearest woman. He will call his mom. He will call his sister. He will call his female friend because his feelings are hurt. And he knows that he can receive emotional support from a woman and not a man. And so this is another form of emotional labor, though, for the woman because she is acting as his emotional support, but he doesn't act as her emotional support. So let's say she gets fired from her job. The man will start saying, well, why did you do that? Why did you get fired from your job? You could have just done XYZ. That wasn't smart. I can't believe you got fired. That was dumb. Those types of comments are not emotionally supportive. That is not creating a safe space. And so that's a form of emotional labor for the woman. Another very common form of emotional labor that women experience when dealing with men is negging. Him putting you down, him taking you down a notch, him saying, oh, you're pretty, but you're not that pretty, or your sister's prettier than you, your daughter's prettier than you, your cousin is hot, you're okay, she's a 10 out of 10, you're a 7 out of 10. That puts a huge emotional burden on the woman because now he is literally putting you down. He's literally sowing words into your spirit. He's like putting words into your spirit. He's putting words into your heart that are draining your self-esteem away. He's literally chipping away at your confidence with his words. I would assume that if you're with a man, it's because you admire him, you love him, you're emotionally attached to him. So when you are emotionally attached to someone and then that person returns it with putting you down, that's extremely hurtful. So that's another common form of emotional labor that a lot of women experience. Usually this kind of stuff doesn't happen until later on in the relationship once the guy has gotten really comfortable. I know that some guys do negging when they're like when they first meet a woman, but oftentimes a man might start off being really nice to you, but then as time goes on in the relationship, then he sees that you're a little bit too confident. Now he's threatened. So now he resorts to negging you. That is a form of emotional labor for you because you just have to try to react to it in a more mature way. You have to just deal with his immaturity. Or you have to take on another form of emotional labor, which is going out of your way to explain why nagging is wrong, why nagging makes you feel bad, how it doesn't contribute to your relationship. So once again, it's just like this cycle of different types of emotional labor. Another very common form of emotional labor is trying to figure him out. Why didn't he text me back? Why did he stay out late last night? Why didn't he come home on time? Why is he not smiling at me like he used to? Why isn't he kissing me or touching me like he used to? All of those racing thoughts that a woman has in her head where she is, trying to decipher his text messages. She's trying to figure out where he's coming from. He's giving her maybe a silent treatment or something, or he's very angry and he's just randomly not in a good mood. And so now she's over here like panicking, basically trying to figure out what went wrong or like what she did wrong. That is a form of emotional labor because you're literally spending your time thinking about how he's feeling. Instead of just enjoying the relationship, instead of relaxing, instead of feeling like it's really fun and carefree, you're having the exact opposite experience where you're feeling all this anxiety because you're like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with him? What happened? What made him switch up? Why did he cheat on me? Why did he leave me? All of that is emotional labor. Another form of emotional labor is when you have to listen to his lectures, listen to him get on his soapbox, and listen to all of his political views that you disagree with on a consistent basis. So that is emotional labor because you just have to sit there and just take one for the team. You have to listen to him get on his soapbox and talk about whatever conspiracy he believes in. You have to listen to his red pill talking points, or he just randomly starts lecturing you about certain things. That is what I mean when I say emotional labor. And by the way, on average, it's funny how a lot of men, they want the woman to listen to him, but then like he won't listen to you. So I've noticed that one of the main things that men are looking for, they're looking for sex, companionship, and access to more money. But oftentimes the companionship part is literally just you listening to his rants so he finally gets to feel important because you guys know my theory on this. Most men feel like losers. Most men feel irrelevant without women. A lot of guys have spent their lives being lied to by society and told that if you have a certain job, you will succeed, or if you're a certain height or a certain race, or if you check off these boxes, then you'll be happy. So a lot of men are walking around with no purpose. They have no passions, no inner happiness. And so they seek after women so that they can be almost like these emotional vampires to women. Because I've noticed that a lot of us women are very good at nurturing ourselves. We're good at self-care. We are good at like resting and relaxing and taking time away from everyone. We don't necessarily need to be around a bunch of people in order to feel fulfilled. But I've noticed for a lot of men, a lot of guys spend their time being very socially isolated, especially once they're done with high school and college and stuff. A lot of guys are just going to work, coming home, playing video games, jacking off to porn, and then going to sleep. And so him having a girlfriend, he finally has someone who can actually listen to him. But he doesn't realize that by him constantly spewing his soapbox lectures and stuff, it's actually annoying to the woman. And so she has to go through the emotional labor of dealing with feeling annoyed, trying to pretend like she's interested in the conversation. In some cases, she might pretend to agree with him, or she might not agree with him, and then it turns into this whole argument, and that is exhausting. Another form of emotional labor that a lot of women take on is never getting that apology. Have you ever been around the type of man where he does not apologize for mistreating you? He doesn't apologize because he sees it as not a big deal. He doesn't say sorry for like not being affectionate towards you. He feels like it's unnecessary. Sometimes he will even make excuses and say, well, sorry doesn't mean anything. It's about me changing my actions. You know those type of guys who will be mean to you, and then he realizes that he was mean to you, so then he tries to hurry up and jump to being nice to you. I don't do well with those types of guys because that's too much emotional labor for me, having to process the fact that, wait a minute, he was just emotionally like rude to me and abusive towards me, and now he's suddenly trying to be nice to make up for it, but he doesn't know how to communicate, hey, I was wrong. I should not have done that. That was a stupid thing to say. I won't do that again. I love you. I want to reassure you. So a lot of guys, they don't know how to communicate that. And so that causes emotional labor for the woman because she's having to emotionally process all this. Like, wait, does he love me? Does he not love me? He's not reassuring me. He's not very encouraging towards me. I don't feel any surge of confidence when I'm around him. In fact, I feel emotionally unstable when I'm around him. And by the way, a part of where that emotional instability comes from is the fact that you're overwhelmed with the emotional labor, so much so to the point where you are actually collapsing underneath the pressure. You're collapsing under the stress. So this is why sometimes women, we do things that are out of character. So like maybe you were never a cheater before, but now you find yourself cheating on this man. You were never the type to yell at a guy or throw things. Now you find yourself yelling and throwing things. It's because you're collapsing under the pressure of all of that emotional labor that's been going on in the relationship. You didn't address it. You didn't communicate with him. You should have broken up with him a long time ago. You should have removed his access to you. He should have been blocked a long time ago, but he's still in your life. And so this is what happens where people will start off really, really happy. And then 10 years later, it's like you don't even recognize that person anymore. And that's because that person has collapsed under the pressure of all that emotional labor. This is also why sometimes when couples argue, they will randomly bring up stuff from 10 or 20 years ago. And it's like, wow, you never said that. You never told me that. It's because that emotional labor has been building up. And if you guys don't communicate it, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse and keep building on top of each other. This is very common in relationships. And so all of that suppressed stuff, like all of those suppressed emotions that came from you not being willing to be vulnerable, whether it's you as the woman or him as the man not wanting to be vulnerable about his insecurities, well, now all of that emotional labor has built up to where you're both collapsing under the pressure of it. And this is where we get those toxic relationship cycles from, where it's like, you're arguing all the time randomly. You might start off having a nice vacation and then suddenly the vacation is ruined. That's where all of that comes from. It's from all of the emotional labor. Another form of emotional labor that people don't talk about is vulnerability. It's difficult to be vulnerable. And a lot of men, I've noticed they don't appreciate vulnerability, but like it's very difficult to open up, especially to a man, about, I don't know, maybe the bad things you went through in the past or whatever your insecurities are. It's difficult to open up about those things and to say, hey, I feel insecure when you are looking at other women. I don't feel secure in my relationship with you when you are texting your ex and stuff. That makes me feel like you don't really value me. It makes me feel like you don't really love me. It takes a lot of courage to be able to say those words, because obviously if you say that, then, the man, he could end up dissing you or, like, I don't know, insulting you and stuff. So being vulnerable is actually hard. It is a form of sacrifice, to be vulnerable. That's an emotional sacrifice that a lot of women make. And then I've noticed that sometimes guys will respond badly, and then they will downplay it and say, oh, well, that's not a big deal. Well, being emotionally vulnerable, that is a form of emotional labor. But then it's even worse if you are vulnerable with a guy and then he downplays it and says, well, you're just being insecure. I can text whoever I want. It's not like I'm effing her. It's not like me and you are married anyway. We've only been together for a few months. So him doing that in response to your vulnerability, now that's even more of an emotional labor on you, because now you have to go back home and process, okay, what am I going to do now? Am I going to stay with him? Can I put up with this for the rest of my life? Am I going to continue to deal with this? Can I get over this? So this is why a lot of women are now decentering men altogether, because they realize that just the emotional labor, the amount of time it takes to process all of that stuff and then to think of a plan, like, okay, what's my breakup plan going to be? What am I going to do from here on out? How am I going to react the next time he says this? I need to think of a comeback for the next time he tries to argue. And it's like all of that is wasting your precious intelligence. And you're literally wasting your brain neurons on figuring out a comeback for your boyfriend when you could be spending all of that time thinking about yourself. Like all of that energy that you're putting into him, trying to figure him out and stuff like that, trying to figure out what to say and the right words to say to him, that's emotional labor. It's funny because I saw this video where married women, they were like, the way that you get your husband to like take out the trash and stuff is you need to figure out a way to ask him for something in a way that inspires him. You need to figure out how to speak to him and inspire him so that he can take out the trash and do what you want. But they don't realize how much emotional labor that actually is. Not every woman wants to put in that sort of emotional labor. Okay, let me figure out what are the right words to say to him to get him to take out the trash. How can I say it in a way that's motivational and inspirational? What facial expressions do I need to show him when I'm asking him this question so he can take out the trash? I'm not doing all that. If I have to turn into an entire motivational speaker just to get you to do a simple task, well, then you are an emotional drain on my energy, because that's way too much energy just to figure out how to ask you a simple question that I really shouldn't even have to ask in the first place. So that's another example of emotional labor. It's like when you're trying to figure out the wording on like how to say stuff, you're trying to figure out comebacks and stuff, you're trying to Google things and come up with all of these conflict resolution strategies. It's when you're looking online, you're on Reddit or you're searching through YouTube for different relationship problems and you're hoping to get some advice that can help you to save your relationship. All of that time that you spend, all those hours that you spend doing that, that is a form of emotional labor that you're investing into the relationship. And that is something that he may or may not appreciate in the future. This is what women mean when they say, this is invisible labor, because it is. He doesn't know that you spent the last 2 hours searching on Reddit for like relationship advice. He doesn't know that you spent the last month and a half reading a relationship book. That's another form of emotional labor. It's having to take all of these hours just to educate yourself on how to conduct yourself in that relationship with him. That's a form of emotional labor. You're sacrificing your time, you're sacrificing your energy. Another form of emotional labor is the thought process that goes into dating strategy. So this is before you're even in a committed relationship. You're trying to figure out, okay, what zip codes are the richest zip codes and like how far does it take to drive there? Okay, now I got to stop at the gas station, got to make sure my lashes and my hair extensions are on point. Okay, now I have to like look at him from the side and then smile, but then I can't be too desperate. Okay, now I have to make sure he gets my number and stuff, and then I want to see if I can like text him. Now I have to do it again. All of that is emotional labor just to get the man, just to strategize to be able to attract that man. Or for the women, for the hypergamous girls, okay, when is so-and-so NFL player going to be in town? What time does the doctor get off? Okay, I see that Dr. Johnson works over at such and such family practice. Let me drive over there and schedule an appointment and get all dressed up, and then hopefully he will see me and hopefully he'll fall in love with me. That is still a form of emotional labor. Interacting on dating apps, having to figure out the wording, like, okay, what do I put in my bio? How can I describe myself in 3 words? What am I going to say for these prompts? What pictures do I want to put up? Okay, I want to make sure to not put up a picture with a filter. That is also emotional labor, having to be the one that always sends the first text, being the one that's always saying good morning, good night, how are you? How are you feeling? Where are you at in this relationship? How are you feeling relationship-wise? Are you okay? Are you doing well? Are you feeling anxious or anything? How's our relationship going? The woman is usually the one who is asking all of those questions, and this is a part of why women are choosing to just opt out, because they're seeing that asking all the questions, it didn't make him treat you better. Putting all of the strategy in your bio and stuff, it didn't mean that you suddenly were able to weed out dusties. Driving to that guy's zip code and, sitting at a bar for 4 hours hoping that a man walks up to you, you didn't end up getting a hypergamous marriage out of it. And so this leads to the next form of emotional labor, which is sacrificing your peace. So, having to get up and rush to happy hour. Oh, it starts at 5 or it ends at 7. I have to hurry up and get there. Rushing through traffic, paying for valet parking, trying to get your car washed so your car doesn't look super horrible once you park in that parking lot. Doing all of these things, kind of like rushing around and then walking in there all anxious, having this competitive energy with other women because all the NFL players are in here or all these millionaires are in here. So having that heightened sense of anxiety and stuff, that is a huge form of emotional labor. And that's a part of why a lot of women are opting to just completely decenter men, because then you don't have to, all this weight can be taken off of your shoulders. You don't have any of that emotional labor of before you get into the relationship, during the relationship, and then after the relationship. There are plenty of stats that show that the average divorce rate is around 50%. The average breakup rate, if you are not married, is around 70%. So there's a 7 in 10 chance that whoever you're with today, your boyfriend, he is most likely going to be gone in the next 5 years. And so what a lot of people don't talk about is the emotional labor that comes after the relationship, or like towards the end of the relationship, figuring out, okay, how do I send this breakup text? How do I break up with this guy in a way that I'm still safe? Is he going to get mad at me? Is he going to start throwing things? Is he going to try to lock me in the apartment? Because a lot of guys, they won't let you leave. And so that actually takes a lot of strategy and planning and emotional labor on the woman's part, because now she has to figure out how to break up with you and how to break up in a way that's amicable. And then she has to go through this whole healing process. This is a part of why I believe that healing should really be a lifestyle, not something that you just start after a breakup. You should have been on your inner healing journey regardless. But anyway, for a lot of women who are unprepared, now they have to go through this whole entire healing process. They have to basically try to cope with this newfound PTSD that they just got from this man in this relationship. And so that's another form of emotional labor that women put in. And then she has to try to figure out how to manage herself emotionally so that the next guy doesn't suffer because of the last guy. You know how guys say, you're punishing me because of the last guy. So now that woman has to deal with the emotional labor of, trying to get rid of that baggage from this last guy who basically screwed her over, and then trying to repeat the same process all over again with a brand new guy, hoping that it doesn't turn out the same way. Another way that you end up doing emotional labor is any sacrifice you make in order to make him look better to others. A lot of married women do this. She is the one who is applying for those promotions for him. She's writing his resume for him. She's the one behind the scenes actually doing all of the administrative tasks for his business. She's filing his taxes. She's the one who's calling the bank. She's getting the business bank set up so that she can go brag to her friends, my husband owns a business. But in reality, she was the one who put in all of the emotional labor that came with that business, having to figure out how to run a business that she's never been a part of, having to deal with feeling inadequate and overcome imposter syndrome when it comes to running that man's business. having to keep everything organized, like all the to-do lists, all of the checklists, thinking about what things need to be restocked in the pantry or in the house, keeping up with birthdays and anniversaries, and reminding him of his son's birthday, reminding him to call his brother. All of those things are forms of emotional labor. I've never seen a man that goes out of his way to memorize not only his wife's birthday, but everybody else's birthday around the wife. So his sisters-in-law, his brother-in-laws, all the nephews and nieces, and then he writes them down on a calendar. No, that's something that the woman is normally doing. And that is a form of emotional labor. Another form of emotional labor that I've never heard anyone talk about is in the bedroom. The woman has to figure out how to be sexy for him, how to entice him. What pajamas or lingerie or whatever do I feel sexy in? So now you have to deal with your own body image issues. Now you have to deal with your own insecurities about your thighs, your stomach, your double chin, whatever's hanging out on the side. Oh crap, this lingerie outfit doesn't look cute. I don't look cute in this outfit when I'm around the house. So it's overcoming your own personal body image issues, and then with your newfound confidence or whatever, using that emotional labor to be appealing to him and to come off as confident to him when you know you don't feel that cute in your little lingerie. You know that you're uncomfortable with doing these different kinks or whatever. You know that you don't like how you look with this push-up bra on. Maybe you're self-conscious about your boob size or your butt size. So all of that requires emotional labor. Being able to be vulnerable enough. This is another thing. People don't understand that sex is a form of vulnerability for a lot of people. For some people, maybe if that's your job, maybe it's not vulnerable, maybe you don't care. But there are a lot of women to where, showing herself in that way and giving herself to a guy in that way, that is a vulnerable experience. And it's very easy for a woman to feel traumatized if the man doesn't know how to appreciate her when it comes to things like her body or like in the bedroom or whatever. And so this is another reason why a lot of women have so much of a problem with porn and guys, cheating and stuff and still wanting other sex workers. It's not about just the cheating in itself. It's about the fact that you have basically shown her that you are willing to sacrifice your relationship with her. You're willing to make her feel inadequate. You think that those other girls' bodies like look better than hers or whatever. You'd rather be with a girl on a screen that you're never going to meet. That girl on the screen doesn't give enough about you. She didn't invest anything in you. Meanwhile, you have this other woman right next to you who has invested her time, her life, her energy, and her body into you, and now she's still not good enough. That is a gigantic and crippling form of emotional labor for a lot of women, and it causes a lot of women to have lower self-esteem. This is why we see bigger women who complain and stuff and say that like they don't feel as confident in their bodies. This is also why women who are pregnant, they're also very vulnerable at this time because they know that men on average are not attracted to pregnant bodies and stuff like that. And so now she's having to deal with the emotional labor that comes with her body image as a woman who is now pregnant, so now she has stretch marks. Now she has a swollen nose. Now her double chin is showing and all that. Now her ankles are all swollen and she has cankles and stuff. All of that is a form of emotional labor. Having to overcome your own body image issues, or in some cases, a man will introduce new body image issues into that woman's mind. So like maybe she was never even insecure about her boobs being small, but now because she caught you watching porn of a woman with big boobs, now she's suddenly insecure. Or maybe she just got a BBL and then she sees you trying to talk to women who have small butts or something. Or maybe she wasn't insecure about her weight, but then she saw her boyfriend flirting with a woman who's very skinny. So all of that is a form of emotional labor. Now she has to go home and go within herself, process all those emotions, overcome all of these random thoughts that are going to keep popping into her head. Now she has to do all of these different coping mechanisms to deal with her own anxiety and her newfound insecurities because of that relationship. Another form of emotional labor that a lot of women will have to deal with is trust issues. All it takes is one time of a guy betraying a woman's trust for her to now have a brand new insecurity in that relationship. So maybe she's never been with a guy who was still texting his ex before, and now, this is her first time dealing with this. So now that's a brand new insecurity. She had never even thought about that before, and now boom, here she is thinking about your ex, and now she's over here thinking in her mind, okay, does he still like her? And so now she has brand new trust issues that that guy actually caused. He could have prevented that if he would have simply not kept in contact with exes, or, not had any female friends blocking him or cock blocking him, basically, because that's really what happens. A lot of guys they don't realize that they're actually not being very strategic and smart. If you want a woman to want to sleep with you, you probably should not surround yourself with a whole bunch of other women. Just saying, just in general, any good quality, confident woman who wants a serious relationship and she wants a lot of emotional intimacy as well, she's not going to invest, if she's smart, she's not going to want to invest as many emotions into a guy where she feels like he's playing games, or like, he's around all of these other women. He has all of these female orbiters. And so that's another insecurity that a lot of guys introduce into a relationship. They cause that woman to have to do the emotional labor now of, wait a minute, do I trust him? How do I feel about guys with a lot of girlfriends? This has never happened to me. How do I feel about a guy with a girl best friend, or, this girl that he's known since high school and they text every day and they send each other pictures? I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I trust him. So then every single time your phone vibrates, now she gets that pit feeling in the back of her throat. Now her stomach is turning every time she hears your phone go off, because she's thinking in the back of her mind, is Sarah texting him again? Is Tiffany texting him again? And so now she has to deal with that brand new emotional labor that you just introduced into the relationship. Another form of emotional labor that a lot of women go through is having to hear about either his sexual history or his exes or baby mama's ex-wife, whatever it may be. So this goes back to the whole listening thing. Like, you have to listen to him being vulnerable, and it's like you value him being vulnerable, so it's like you want to listen, you want to be a safe space, but you didn't necessarily want to hear all of these details about how he only dates blondes and you're a brunette, or every single one of his exes was 5'9" and skinny and you're short and boxy and fat or something. So now you're having to, once again, have that emotional labor of processing that information. Now you have to go back and soothe yourself after the conversation. Like, okay, how can I make sure that I still feel confident, or how can I make sure that I still feel special? So all of that is, once again, emotional labor. Another form of emotional labor is nurturing or caregiving. So let's say you live with a guy. You're making sure that he has clean clothes for work. You're checking in with him and saying, hey, you have to wake up at 6 a.m. tomorrow. You may want to get some sleep. Oh, how are you feeling? Like, I didn't see you eat any vegetables today. Did you eat your fruits and vegetables? So you're helping him to maintain his physical health, but it costs you a lot of like time and energy to remember not just your health schedule, not just your food schedule or your laundry schedule, but now you're memorizing his. And so what people don't realize is that there are a lot of responsibilities that come with being in a relationship or a marriage. And by the way, do what's best for you. There is no right or wrong answer. For some people, some of these things are easy. For other people, some of these things are absolute deal breakers. And then there are still some people who are like, nope, I'm not doing any of it. I don't want anything taking away from my peace. So there is no wrong answer. But one thing I have noticed is that when it comes to women, usually women are good at different kinds of emotional labor, whereas a lot of men, they tend to be kind of bad. Like, there are a lot of men who are bad at certain types of emotional labor. So for example, vulnerability. A lot of guys are extremely bad at that type of emotional labor. Conflict resolution. That's another one where a lot of guys tend to struggle. Maybe that guy is a smooth talker, so maybe he's good at encouraging you and making you feel sexy, making you feel validated. But when it comes to the emotional labor of solving an argument, or when it comes to the emotional labor of setting boundaries, he's bad at that. He doesn't know how to set boundaries with his female friends. He doesn't know how to set boundaries with his mom and his dad. So now you have to deal with all of those, the lack of boundaries. Now you have to be the emotional punching bag of his female friends, of the in-laws, and that is yet another form of emotional labor. It's dealing with boundaries. Boundary setting is a skill, and yes, it's very difficult. It takes courage. It takes balls. It takes like guts to be able to say to your female friend, hey, I have a girlfriend now. I don't want to be texting you at 11 p.m. Like, it takes courage for people to say that, but for a lot of men, they don't have courage. There are so many men out there who lack courage. There are a lot of men out there who are very cowardly, or they're just so desperate for female validation to the point where they're willing to sacrifice their relationship with you so that they can maintain their female orbiters, or they can maintain their female friendships, or they can maintain being seen as the cool guy by their friends and family. So they don't mind if their friends diss you, or he's not affectionate towards you when he's around his family and when he's around his bros, and it's because he lacks boundaries. But that causes an emotional burden on you, because now as the woman, you're over here feeling like, well, am I left out? Like, is he treating me like I'm not special? I noticed that he calls his girlfriend by a special nickname. He doesn't have a special nickname for me. So now you're having to do all these emotional coping mechanisms in your mind. That's a form of emotional labor. Another thing that a lot of people don't talk about is hobbies. So taking interest in a hobby that you normally wouldn't, because your boyfriend or your date, your husband, he likes that particular thing. So usually if you're in a relationship, it's pretty common that you won't have every little thing in common. And so oftentimes you're going to find yourself going to a football game that you didn't really want to go to, or going to play pool and maybe you don't like pool, maybe you don't like golfing. You're doing all of these different activities that you don't prefer to do because he likes doing those things. But depending on the guy, for some people, this could be a form of emotional labor because you wanted to spend your afternoon doing self-care, or maybe you were just extra tired that day. So it actually requires sacrifice for you to even get up and go to the golf place, or to go to the pool table thing, or to go to the football game. That's another form of emotional labor. And the same can be said for men. Like, a lot of guys, they don't want to go with you to the makeup store while you walk around for 2 hours. They don't want to go with you to the shoe store while you look at high heels and stuff. So for some guys, they won't even reciprocate. So like, you will spend 5 or 10 hours doing his hobbies, but then when it's time to go and do your hobbies, he doesn't want to participate. He doesn't care about it. He wants you to go by yourself. And so that's another form of emotional labor that often comes up in a relationship. Usually the woman is the one sacrificing more of her time and more of her effort to kind of impress that guy and do what he likes to do, but usually he doesn't do the same for her. It's basically doing something where you get paid back in feelings. So you're hoping that he reciprocates. You're hoping that when you encourage him, that one day he will encourage you. You're hoping that if you say, I love you, he says, I love you too. All of that becomes emotional labor when it is not reciprocated. Or maybe you feel like you're constantly the one saying, I love you first. He doesn't say, I love you first. You're always texting first. He's not. You're always the one coming up with the date ideas. You're the one who's coming up with different places to go and like fun activities to do. He's not coming up with that. You're the one who's trying to get him off of his phone. You get him out of his box, but he doesn't do the same for you. You're pushing him forward in his career. He doesn't do the same for you. Anytime you're not being reciprocated, that is a form of emotional labor, because you're having to come back and soothe yourself every single time. So all of that time that you could have spent enjoying yourself, now you're spending that time rationalizing things to yourself. You're spending that time trying to figure out the right wording to ask him to do a certain chore. All of those things clutter up your mind. And so this is what women mean when we say, like, we don't want to invest in all of that emotional labor, because oftentimes the guy, he doesn't care that you stayed up until midnight just so you could be the first one to text him happy birthday. He doesn't care that you said good morning to him 5 days in a row. He doesn't care that you went out of your day, you took off work, you canceled your plans just so you could be there to support him. Another form of emotional labor is hand-holding. So you have to basically do everything in your power just to make sure that this man acts like a responsible adult. You have to basically give him the answer every single time. You have to tell him exactly what to say, exactly what to do, and you basically have to act on his behalf because he is not emotionally available, he's not dependable. All of that, dealing with that kind of drama, that's a form of emotional labor because you are basically dragging a dead weight. And this is what I mean when I say an emotional dead weight or an emotional liability. If you're in the presence of a man and the longer you stay around him, the worse you feel, or like the less beautiful you feel, the less turned on you feel, the less sexy you feel and stuff, that is an emotionally draining situation. That means that he is an emotional liability. So he's literally dragging down your mood. He's dragging down your sexiness. He's dragging down your confidence. You know how some guys will be like, oh, when I first met you, you were so ambitious, or, before you got with Scott, you used to be so carefree. And now, ever since you got in this relationship, now suddenly you're depressed. Now you're not as ambitious. Now you're lazy. Yeah, that's because the emotional labor of the relationship has been a liability to that woman. So instead of her focusing her mind on how she can level up, she's too busy trying to figure out how she can solve arguments, how she can resolve conflict, how she can get him to stop cheating, how she can get him to finally trust her, how she can get him to be vulnerable. That's what I mean when I say emotional liability. It means he takes your focus off of having fun, and it literally becomes like this horrible relationship to where when you go home, it's almost as if you are coming down from a high. So like you were having fun when you weren't around him. You came to life when you weren't around that guy. But then when you go back to him, once you come home or once he comes to pick you up from work, then suddenly it's back to, having that mundane feeling, back to having that like bad marriage. This is also why people say they argue like a married couple, or you guys act like a married couple. Yeah, it's because a lot of married couples, the emotional labor that is required to stay in a marriage for 30 years, yes, it's going to drain people. It's going to make that person no longer excited when they see their spouse. And they might say to others, I'm excited, but they're really not, because if you compare the excitement of a married couple for 30 years versus the excitement of he just met this woman in a bar, or they've been together 6 months or 1 year, it's always different. Why? Because emotional labor, if it becomes too hard and like too much over time, it chips away at those endorphins. It chips away at the enjoyment. It chips away at feeling like you're in love. Like all of the reasons you get into a relationship, to feel special, to be loved, to love on someone else, to have companionship, to have fun, emotional labor chips away at all of those things. This is also why a lot of couples where they have kids and stuff, why their relationship can go down and why the man can like cheat or feel resentful. It's because now you've got the emotional labor of a husband and a child. And so you've got two people draining on you now. And so you don't have the energy. You don't feel sexy. That's the last thing you're thinking about. Like seriously, just think about this from a logical perspective. If you're being emotionally drained by a newborn baby, and your body is physically like you just had the baby or something, and now you've got a husband making demands on you, or boyfriend or whatever, yes, the average woman, she's not in the mental space of feeling sexy and stuff. Because remember, emotions are mental. Your thoughts create your emotions. The thoughts you're thinking create your emotions. So if you think sexy thoughts, or if you think about how sexy you are, or if a man makes you think these thoughts about how sexy you are and stuff, yeah, you're going to feel sexy. But if you are spending all your time just thinking about how to change the baby, how to feed the baby, how do I pay 50% of these bills, oh my God, we're behind on the light bill, then yeah, of course she's not going to feel in the mood, because her thoughts are not creating the emotions of feeling sexy. Another really big form of emotional labor for women is having to be the constant problem solver, constantly trying to solve his financial problems, his business problems, his emotional problems, problems with the baby mama, with the ex-wife, with his children, with the in-laws. That is a huge emotional drain on a woman. And it's funny because a lot of men, they are very attracted to carefree women, and they don't realize this, but they're very attracted to women who are carefree, women who are very stress-free, because they're confident, they're beautiful, they have time to invest in their bodies, they have time to do their makeup and to figure out what hair colors look good on them, they have time to become actresses and singers and models and whatever and level up. So a lot of men, they're attracted to these carefree types of women, but they don't realize that in order to get to those positions in life, those women had to overcome, or they had to get rid of, a lot of emotional labor. So this is a part of why men, they like to chase after the free bird, and they want to put her back in the cage. They want to chase after these women who are already like independent and stuff like that. And then he wants to get that woman to submit to him because it makes him feel more special, because he has this mindset of He doesn't want that mundane woman. He doesn't want the woman who's like taking care of the babies and she's all stressed out. He doesn't want to be around that because that causes emotional labor on him. He wants to be with a carefree woman, but he doesn't realize that the woman is only carefree because she doesn't deal with men like him. She's carefree because she chose to be child free. She is carefree and sexy and confident because she doesn't want marriage. She is carefree and has all this confidence and level up ability because she has decentered men. So it's funny because a lot of men, they end up going on this hamster wheel where they're constantly trying to chase after these other women. Meanwhile, the pick-me's are right there. Yes, you're going to deal with the emotional labor of dealing with the pick-me, obviously, but at least they're available for you. But no, the guys want the ones who are the carefree women. They want the women who don't have all that emotional labor dragging them down, because emotional labor, it chips away at your self-esteem, it chips away at your confidence, it distracts you from achieving your goals. This is why a lot of women, they will get into these relationships and have all these kids and they never got their degree. They never got their business started. They never lost all the weight because they were too busy dealing with emotional labor. They weren't emotionally available to achieve their dreams. They were so busy trying to do all these coping mechanisms from the relationship, and the relationship was such a drag to the point where they were spending all of their free time trying to fix this man or trying to fix this relationship when they could have been spending that time in the gym. They could have been spending it getting their doctorate, getting their master's. And so this is a part of why single, child-free women are one of the happiest demographics in the world. I think they're actually the happiest demographic in the world. It's unmarried women who are child-free. And that's because they don't have to deal with all of this emotional labor that comes with being around a child and, dealing with a man-child as well, and then dealing with in-laws and stuff. They don't have all of that emotional labor, so they don't have the stress on them. And this is why, they tend to look better and stuff too, because they don't have the stresses. Stress ages you. It makes your hair go gray. It makes you get fat more easily. It causes your immune system to go down and stuff. So emotional labor is a form of stress. It's like a very small form of stress that can build up over time, depending on which type of emotional labor is the most triggering to you. So out of all of these types that I named, for some of you guys, you're more triggered by him cheating and stuff like that. Like for me, a lot of these things I named, these are all deal breakers for me at this point, because I don't want to deal with damn near any emotional labor, or like a very, very, very tiny amount. I don't have a high tolerance. I'm not like this mule. I'm not a work mule. I'm not an emotional punching bag. So no, I can't just sit there and just deal with being a man's emotional punching bag. I can't deal with a man just, constantly making me feel like trash in favor of another woman or something like that. So for different women, they have different emotional triggers. Some women feel like it's really bad if the guy is like cheating and stuff. For other women, it's if he's not dependable. And then there are women like me who can get triggered by any of those things. But another form of emotional labor is having to deal with a guy who is very inexperienced when it comes to being available in a relationship. So for example, let's say you are with this guy and you are his first very serious relationship. So he has no relationship skills whatsoever. Because remember, relationships, interpersonal relationships, whether it's romantic or platonic or with your family, that is a skill. So for a lot of men, they've never even had a long-term girlfriend. They don't know how to long-term plan, and they haven't taken the time to learn these skills. And so they're just learning on the fly. They're learning in the middle of their relationship with you. And so now you have to sit there and teach him how to be your boyfriend. You have to teach him how to treat you. You have to teach him how to be your husband. And it's like, if I have to spend the rest of my life acting like an elementary school teacher to a 40-year-old man, I don't have time for that. So that's another form of emotional labor. Not every woman wants to spend the next 20 years teaching a guy how to treat her. And it's hilarious. The married couples that have been together for like 50 years, the woman will be like, oh yeah, he used to yell at me. He used to throw bottles at me. He used to do all this crazy stuff, but he finally learned how to treat me 20 years later. And now he treats me like a queen. And it's like, not every woman has 20 years to spare on teaching a guy how to communicate with her, teaching a guy how to please her in the bedroom. That's another thing. That's a huge form of emotional labor. The guy getting offended if you are not pleased in the bedroom. First of all, it's not usually a sex problem. Usually it's a communication problem. And some guys are so immature to the point where if you tell him, oh, hey, can you do it like this or can you do that in the bedroom? Then he will like get mad and be like, no, I'm already good at sex. I know what I'm doing. Like, this is the area that I'm good at. And it's like, well, good at it with who? Like, just because you think you were good at it in the past, I'm not these other women. I'm not your exes. I'm not some random person. And so, for a lot of women, if they can't communicate to their husband or their boyfriend about sex, then that is a huge emotional labor because now she's not going to get pleased at all. Or maybe he's hurting her in some cases, or he's kind of like, it's boring to her. She's not excited at all. So then it becomes a chore for the woman. So that is a huge emotional labor, feeling like, oh crap, I have to do this chore again. And that's another thing, by the way. I've noticed that a lot of women who don't enjoy sex with their boyfriend or whatever, of course, they don't care if he looks at porn. They don't care if he gets off some other way because she's not pleased by him anyway. So she's like, all right, good. You can just go take care of that yourself. Less work for me. But another form of emotional labor is doing administrative tasks. So scheduling his appointments, calling the housing repair people, calling the plumber, calling the people to come do the lawn, making sure that the kids know how to get to the bus stop or, organizing stuff for the kids like soccer practice and things like that, meal prepping for yourself or for your spouse. That's another form of emotional labor for women because she's taking time away from her self-care. She's taking time away from her spiritual practice or from her, from like connecting with herself. She's taking time away so that she can do stuff for other people. So this is why a lot of married mothers become martyrs. They become the emotional martyrs of their family. And this is a part of why the decentering men movement is so big. It's because women are tired of being emotional martyrs. So whether you are in a relationship or not, women are choosing to center themselves because they've realized that no matter how much you martyr for someone else, it's never going to fulfill you. And usually it's not going to fulfill him either because you're going to be resentful against whoever you were a martyr for. You've met those women who spent their whole lives sacrificing for other people. These are the mothers who resent their children. These are the wives who nag their husbands. These are the basic Bettys at work who torment the young, beautiful women who are full of hope. These women spent their lives being martyrs and kind of like being at the bottom. They made themselves inferior. They put themselves at the bottom of the hierarchy in their own lives, and they literally sat on the sidelines of their own life for 50 and 60 years. They let their own life pass them by. This is also why gray divorce is increasing. So that's like when older women, they choose to get a divorce because they're like, look, I don't care if I'm 65. I don't care if we've been married 30 years. I'm ready to finally live my life for myself. I'm tired of constantly cooking and cleaning. This is another reason why you don't see a trad wife trend with 65-year-old women. You don't see a trad wife trend with 70-year-old women because eventually women get tired of it. They're like, I don't want to just spend the rest of my life cooking and cleaning and that's all I do. And that's just my existence. So you're telling me that's all I'm going to do for the rest of my life is just cook, clean, and fake orgasms? That's all I'm going to do for the next 80 years? So this is why women, even in their old age, they're saying, look, I've only got 10 or 15 years left. I want to enjoy those years. I want to live those years free of responsibility. I don't want to be responsible for a man, responsible for all these kids, responsible for managing this house, responsible for cooking and cleaning. I want to be responsible for planning my vacations, for planning what bikini I'm going to wear, for planning what type of tan I would like to get on the beach, and that's how I want to spend the rest of my days. This is a part of why gray divorce is rising because women are realizing that all of these things that they spent their lives kind of revolving themselves around, they missed out on so many opportunities. This is also where you get like the bitter old auntie syndrome. These are the women who are like very mad and angry sometimes because they're married and like on the surface it looks great, right? She's a mom, she's a grandma, she's got the husband, but it's like, why is she not happy then? And it's because happiness comes from inside of you. And guess what? Emotional labor also comes from inside of you. And so if all of your space, if all your mental space is filled up with emotional labor, you're not going to have room for happiness at some point. But what do you ladies think? Are there any forms of emotional labor you've had to do in a relationship? Do you have the mindset of, I don't want to do any emotional labor for anybody else? What do you ladies think? Let me know in the comment section and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.